Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Woolen, and I'm your host this evening for Inside Scoop. Affordable housing is an issue nationally as well as locally, with influencing factors coming from housing stability to skyrocketing property values. It's something that we should all pay attention to, especially with 1 in 17 families in Fairfax County living at the poverty line. So tonight we have two guests with us that are going to discuss with us the importance of affordable housing and a policy-focused approach. Our first guest is Brooke Schipporeit of the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. Brooke, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, okay, the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. Tell us what that's about, your headquarters, your mission.
Yeah, so we're a national advocacy organization dedicated to achieving racially and socially equitable public policy that ensures people with the lowest incomes have quality homes that are accessible and affordable in communities of their choice. Our goals are to preserve and expand the supply of rental homes affordable and accessible to people with the lowest incomes, bridge the gap between incomes and housing costs by expanding rental assistance, provide emergency rental assistance to households facing a financial shock, and strengthening and enforcing renter protections to even out the power imbalance between renters and landlords. Now, we're based in Washington, D.C., but we, like I said, we are a national organization, and I think it's important to define the term affordable housing because that gets thrown around a lot, and we want to define who we're talking about when we say affordable. So at NLIHC, when we're talking about affordable homes, we're talking about rental homes that are affordable to people with extremely low incomes, and that's people with incomes at or below either the federal poverty guideline or 30% of the area median income, whichever is greater, and affordable meaning they're paying 30% or less of their incomes towards rent and essential utilities.
Wow. And so specifically, what is your role within the organization?
Yeah, so I'm manager of field organizing here, and we have 4 great organizers that I work with, and our team serves as the bridge between what's happening with federal policy here in Washington, D.C., and what's happening in states and local communities across the country. And we do this through relationship building, membership with NLIHC, and just generally mobilizing people to take action on these issues, people across the country who care about affordable housing issues.
I think it's really important that you brought up the relationship, or you brought up actually the difference between a federal perspective and then the local perspective, which leads us into the next part of our conversation. I would like you to elaborate on that. But looking at your kind of to build into that part of the conversation, on your organization's website, there's a 2021 annual report, and you all have a multi-pronged approach to affordable housing. One area I want to focus on within the annual report, it says that the NLIHC made over 13,600 contacts to congressional offices. And that includes that the organization testified at the U.S. House Financial Services Committee and the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. So why is that area of your approach so important when it comes to influencing public knowledge of the issue of affordable housing?
Yeah, so we do focus most of our time on our policy advocacy and at the federal level, because that's where the greatest pot of money is to solve these issues. And so we work alongside our partners across the country, national partners, local partners, to educate federal lawmakers and the public about the need for affordable homes and to hold them accountable to make good policy choices, because we believe that, we know what solutions work, that we've had decades of research and now have proven solutions, but we just need the political will and funding to make those happen.
Sure. Can you talk a bit about your organization's role in COVID policymaking as it relates to affordable housing?
Yeah, COVID was a very busy time for us, as you can imagine. People were losing their jobs. They were having to, you know, isolate at home. And if they were living in overcrowded homes, that was a very difficult scenario to try to isolate and uh, losing their jobs. We fought and won billions of dollars for emergency rental assistance to keep people stably housed even during this big financial situation. So we stopped a eviction tsunami from happening and had the federal government as well have a hold on evictions during that time. So we really saw people show up for themselves and their neighbors to keep people stably housed because that was a foundational piece of keeping people safe during the pandemic.
Yes. And so that's at the federal level. Do you have any data points or any examples that you can speak to as far as at the local level or state level where states have had the opportunity to extend eviction protections, but they chose not to? And if that had an impact on homelessness, on an additional, I guess, financial burden on local governments at all?
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head, but we did hear from folks across the country where that was a really serious issue. Arkansas is popping in my head, for instance, where organizers across the state were jumping in to push for the governor to put a stop on evictions and to put forth that eviction or emergency rental assistance rather. And I know that they were hearing from I don't have the statistics on that, but I know that they were hearing from people constantly. Their phones were just, we heard from folks working on the ground there that their phones were just ringing constantly, people in desperation in need of financial assistance and support at risk of eviction. So I do think that in communities where similar scenarios happened, we have likely seen an increase in homelessness there.
Sure. During our earlier conversation when we were preparing for this show, I remember one thing that we talked about was the difference between affordable housing and low-income housing, and I think that there are many folks who don't understand that there is a difference. Can you elaborate that point for us?
Sure. So it's similar to what I mentioned before that, affordable housing or low-income housing, what we're really talking about is what we need to define first is who it's affordable to. So when we're focusing our efforts, we're focusing on policy that targets and supports people with the lowest income. So like I mentioned, 30% or below the area median income. But in a lot of communities, people throw around the word affordable housing or low-income housing to be further up the income ladder, such as 80% of area median income. But what our research shows is that local, state and local policies, or the local private market cannot adequately supply affordable homes to people with the lowest incomes at the very bottom of the income ladder. And so that's why we need Congress to step in and provide those resources.
Sure. And I know that there was, your organization attended the Housing Policy Forum and Capitol Hill Day. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago we held our annual Housing Policy Forum, and this year was our first in-person forum in 4 years due to the pandemic. We've been doing it virtually the last couple of years, so we were really excited to be back in person with our closest friends who do this work across the country. And this year's theme was Onward to Housing Justice, and there was really an incredible amount of energy leading up to it and throughout the week. Tickets sold out faster than usual. Usually we have same day registration available, and it was sold out well before that. And many people joined the online live stream of the event as well, which was a first for us to have that be a hybrid event. And we had some really powerful speakers, including Matthew Desmond, who launched his new book, Poverty by America, on the first day of Forum. We had Representatives Maxine Waters and Pramila Jayapal, who are fierce housing champions on the Hill, and Department of Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marcia Fudge, who joined 3 of NLIHC's tenant leader cohort members for a fireside chat. And we also, like you mentioned, Capitol Hill Day, on the last day of our forum, we had our largest Capitol Hill Day ever, which was really exciting. The field team that I'm a part of is alongside the policy team puts that on every year. And so to have our largest Capitol Hill Day ever was a huge success. Alongside our state and tribal partners, we collectively mobilized more than 300 advocates to take part in more than 160 Hill meetings with their congressional offices, which spanned across more than 30 states. And the last thing I'll say about that is that I believe that all of this really demonstrates the growing awareness of affordable housing issues across the country and the real hunger that people have to not just sit by and watch it happen to them or their neighbors, but rather take action to hold our elected officials accountable in doing their part to advance affordable housing solutions.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, 1 in 17 individuals or residents of Fairfax County is living in poverty. And so I want to correlate that to your organization's presence at the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Can you talk about how affordable housing is indeed a civil right?
Yeah, so, affordable homes are, we believe an affordable home is a human right because everything, whether it be health or education, your job, all of that starts at home. And so we believe that in order to succeed in other areas of life, you need an affordable home, and it needs to be safe, decent, and accessible. Our multi-sector partners, as part of our Opportunity Starts at Home campaign, kind of underscore this when they say that people from the domestic violence field or criminal justice, they underscore that advocating for an affordable home is not mission.
I'm going to stop you right there, and please make sure you come back and join us as we continue our conversation on affordable housing.
Caitlin, be serious. Now take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Dare to load their minds. Dare to explore. Dare to STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
You're not the kind of guy that makes the girls all sad.
2 for 3.
They never turn their heads and look when you walk by. 'Cause it's the little things.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Helping.
What a nice young man.
Pass it on.
My goodness.
You are not what you got.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
I better get out of here.
Get it.
Get it.
Get it.
Give your town a reason to celebrate, because every Goodwill item you bring home brings job training and more to your community. Goodwill, bring good home.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Thank you so much for joining us and coming back to Inside Scoop as we continue our conversation with Brooke Schipporeit, the field manager for the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And I had to cut Brooke off because we were so enthralled in the conversation, but I do want to go back to the point of why affordable housing is indeed, it's not only a civil right, but it's a human right. So Brooke, if you want to continue the point that you were making. Brooke, are you muted?
Oh, I'm so
There
sorry.
we go. That's okay.
Thank you, Deborah.
Sure.
Yes, I was just saying that, an affordable home is so foundational to every other area of life, and our multi-sector campaign, the Opportunity Starts at Home campaign, other groups from different sectors that do not focus on housing have joined us in affordable housing advocacy because they recognize that having an affordable home and advocating for that is not mission creep to their work, it's really mission critical.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And I think that leads us into the next point, federal policies that the National Low Income Housing Coalition, policies that your organization is focusing on right now. Can you elaborate on those?
Yeah, so just to kind of set the tone here, as many of you are all aware, rents are on the rise, eviction filings are increasing, and we're seeing more homelessness in many communities. So federal housing investments are more critical than ever to sustain our communities and help low-income people achieve economic stability. And we at the National Low Income Housing Coalition know that by prioritizing federal investments for households with the greatest needs, Congress can ensure that limited federal dollars are used most effectively to address the underlying causes of the housing crisis, which is the severe shortage of homes affordable to people with the lowest incomes and the widening gap between incomes and housing costs. So this is where we're focusing our efforts on. And more specifically, there's 3 areas that are top of mind for us that are the federal budget, 2 bipartisan bills called the Family Stability and Opportunity Vouchers Act and the Eviction Crisis Act. And these are the 3 things that we really focused on during our Capitol Hill Day as well. So for the budget, each year we urge Congress to fund affordable housing, homelessness, and community development programs to the highest levels possible. But this year, as many of you may have heard, Congress is discussing reaching the nation's debt limit. And so there have been threats to default on the nation's debt or shut down the government, and using that as leverage to demand budget cuts to domestic programs, which really poses an urgent risk to federal affordable housing and homelessness resources and the millions of people they serve. We strongly believe Congress should not balance our nation's budget on the backs of the lowest income people and families who are already struggling to get by, and instead should provide the highest level of funding possible.
Wow. Later on in the program, we are going to have Supervisor John Foust with us, and he's the chair of the Housing Commission for Fairfax County. So during that segment, we are going to talk about policies specifically related to Fairfax County. But do you have any data points for Fairfax County? Or if not, then what is the overall approach or process to local governments implementing policies that come from the federal level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not as attuned to what happens in the implementation piece, but public housing authorities across the country are largely responsible for taking money from the Department of Housing and Urban Development that Congress funds. And so Congress appropriates that money to HUD, and then they send it to public housing authorities across the country, and they administer programs like the Housing Choice Voucher Program, public housing, and project-based rental assistance. And so states and local communities are in charge of how those funds are used in those communities and making sure that they get to the people who need them the most. I unfortunately don't have specific data points on those programs for Fairfax County, but I do know that Virginia in particular, more broadly, really tracks and is just under the shortage, the national shortage of affordable homes, affordable and available to the lowest income renters. So nationally, we see 33 homes that are affordable and available to extremely low income renters. And in Virginia, that number is 32 homes for every 100 extremely low income households.
Okay, so we've got work to do then.
Yes.
So just kind of segueing a bit into issues that stem from homelessness or other issues within communities that affect homelessness. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so like I said before, an affordable home is really foundational. We all want a safe, decent, affordable, and accessible home in a strong neighborhood. And this isn't just the American dream. This is the foundation to all other areas of life, such as health, educational outcomes, achieving racial equity, and economic productivity and mobility. So families who are rent cost burdened are often forced, and that rent cost burden means they're paying more than 30% of their income towards rent and essential utilities. And so people with extremely low incomes are often forced to make impossible decisions between putting food on the table, paying medical bills, or paying the rent. For example, with education, having a stable, affordable home drives stronger student outcomes. And on the flip side, low-income children who switch schools frequently due to housing instability or homelessness tend to perform less well in school, have learning disabilities and behavioral problems, and are less likely to graduate from high school.
Wow. I think that's another good point. I think that points to the relationship, or I'll ask, in your perspective or your research or the research of your organization, what is the relationship between homelessness and mental health concerns?
Yeah, so that's not something I'm an expert on, but I will say that research does show that homelessness and housing instability does really, really increase risk of depression and anxiety. And I know that, for example, for health, mothers and families that have been behind on rent in the last year are more likely to experience depression and be in poor health than mothers living in stable housing. And children also are experiencing anxiety when they're in an unstable home, or a home that's, they're having to move from one place to another. And so you can only imagine with homelessness how that increases, having to figure out where you're going to lay your head that night.
Yes. I remember there was a nonprofit that I was a part of, and there was a young lady that that I was tasked to help. She was 17. She had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and she was pregnant with her third child. She had come from a broken home, and a school friend of hers had shared her story with his father, and they allowed her to live with him. But she also had a lot of emotional needs, and the situation just became unbearable for both parties. So they contacted our nonprofit, and just through a lot of work, a lot of people pitching in, whether from different organizations or different community leaders, it took a couple of years, but she was able to find stable housing. She's now married, they have another child together. Her life completely turned around because she had stable housing. So you're absolutely right. It really does make a difference, and it can impact someone's life, and then even a young person, how they perform in school. So having said that, as someone who was able to make an impact by way of a nonprofit, what can people do to get involved with helping with the affordable housing crisis that we have in our country?
Yeah, that's a great question. People should be contacting their members of Congress. Oftentimes, it can feel like, like my job is often demystifying the work of Congress for folks, because it feels so far off and abstract. But really, that's, like I said, where the biggest pot of money is, and that's where we're going to get the most work done. And so Congress needs to hear from people across the country, whether you're directly impacted or someone you know, or just what you're seeing in your community. They need to hear why an affordable home and affordable housing in the communities that they serve is important. So people can learn more about the various affordable housing initiatives that we have and policies that we're advocating for, and get involved in our work by visiting our webpage at NLIHC.org. And folks can sign up for our emails there to stay informed on our work and calls to action. They can also sign up for free bi-weekly national calls that we host. There we have updates about what's happening on the Hill and what actions are needed from advocates, as well as the regular homelessness and housing first webinars that we host with our national partners. And folks can also take action directly through our Legislative Action Center on our webpage. We have our policy priorities there listed. So individuals, organizations, everyone can participate through, and we try to make action as easy as possible through that. And then finally, people can become an individual or organizational member of the National Low Income Housing Coalition to support the work that we do. And if folks want to reach out to me directly, I can also answer any questions they have and help them get plugged into our work.
Great. With, I guess with 1 minute left, are there any bills that folks should keep an eye out for, or that they should research when it comes to affordable housing and homelessness?
Yeah, so there's two bipartisan bills in particular that we are focused on. One is the Eviction Crisis Act, which builds on lessons learned from and the infrastructure developed during the pandemic to keep people and families stably housed. So this bill allows Congress to create a permanent, cost-effective tool to provide short-term assistance to stabilize households facing a financial crisis. And then the Family Stability and Opportunity Vouchers Act would provide 500,000 new housing vouchers and housing counseling services to families with young children to help them move to safe, affordable homes and better connect them to well-performing schools, jobs, healthcare services, and transit.
Great.
So both these were,
introduced
last year, and we're working on getting them reintroduced in this session.
Great. Brooke, thank you so much. Folks, please make sure you visit the National Low Income Housing Coalition's website. Please make sure you don't go anywhere. Join us as we continue our conversation with Supervisor John Foust of the Dranesville District, as he is the chair of the Housing Committee for Fairfax County. Please come right back.
Nice going, Spencer! I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
See
ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward.
awkward, I'm the awkward silence.
You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Thank you so much for returning and continuing the conversation on affordable housing. Our next guest is Supervisor John Foust, the supervisor of the Dranesville District of Fairfax County. Supervisor Foust, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sure, sure. It was so appropriate to have you here because you are the chair of the Housing Committee for Fairfax County. But before we get into that, so you have been the supervisor of Dranesville since 2008. It's been quite a ride, huh? It has. So you're also the current chairman of the boards, as I mentioned, the Housing Committee and Economic Initiatives. And you're helping to lead the county toward developing at least 10,000 units. Is it by 2032 that we're trying to do that?
2034.
2034. Okay. So what's the process? Like, how did you get from, I guess, to 10,000? How is that number established, and then the time frame to achieve it?
Well, we had an amazing group of volunteers who were experts in the area of affordable housing, who formed a task force. The Board of Supervisors established a task force, but they carried out the work basically in two phases. They developed a strategic plan. In that strategic plan, phase one was a list of 25 items that we could do kind of short range to advance affordable housing in the county. But the second phase, a lot more detailed effort looking at what the needs were across the county over the next 5, 10, and 15 years. Looking at, what is the county's vision? What do we as a county want to accomplish with regards to affordable housing? And when they did that, they calculated a need for 15,000 new units of affordable housing at 30% or less, 60% or less of the area median income, new units. So their recommendation to the board was we would be responsible for helping deliver 5,000 of those units. We took that on, but it was a floor. There was always an expectation that we would try to do more. We took on the 5,000 as part of adopting the phase 2 of the strategic plan. And when we did that, we just had a lot of success real fast, and the numbers are starting to look pretty good. And so probably last year now, we went ahead and, as a board, said, we know we can do this. We know we got the 5,000. We're going to make that. That's no longer a challenge. Let's bump it up to 10,000. And we're making great progress toward that number. I'm optimistic that long before we get to 2034, the board will be able to take on the full challenge of the 15,000.
Sure. So as I mentioned, you've been the supervisor for Dranesville since 2008. How have the needs for affordable housing changed in your observation during that, between 2008 and where we are right now?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure the needs have changed dramatically, but it's so much more visual to us. We see it where the advocates have done, in my opinion, a spectacular job of educating board members and bringing us, getting us on board with the need. Because on the Board of Supervisors, we deal with so many challenges, so many problems. It takes good advocates to help us find a direction that we can work together on. And I think affordable housing has had some of the best I've seen, and there is now a almost total commitment on the Board of Supervisors. First of all, recognizing the need, recognizing why it's needed, and recognizing that if it's going to happen, we have to be major players. We can't do it all ourselves by any stretch of the imagination, but we have to get involved, and it's in the best interest of the people who will have that housing, obviously, very, very much in their interest. But it's also, in 2015, I led the effort to develop the strategic plan for economic success for Fairfax County, because as you mentioned, I'm chairman of the Economic Advisory Commission and the Economic Initiatives Committee. So all throughout that strategic plan, it's just recognized that if we're going to be a successful local economy, we must address the issue of housing for the workforce. And we have to have housing that attracts people to want to be in Fairfax County. So that's how we got started, and it's come together, and I think, it's going very well at this point.
So since you're the chair of economic initiatives and the housing committee, is there overlap from a policy or even a functional perspective between those two groups?
Yes, I mean, a significant overlap. I'll say with housing, I have three reasons I say we need housing. One is to house the people who need housing. I mean, just flat out, as a government, we should be providing housing, because housing just is not affordable for a lot of people. So you have that reason. You have the reason that not only does it benefit the people who are in the housing and their families, but it benefits the community at large. It makes for a better community when people have quality housing, in and around their own homes. And then the third thing, and this is ties into that question you asked, what is the relationship? Housing is critical, absolutely critical to having a successful economy. If you can't, first of all, you have to house your workforce. We hear over and over again from the employers in Fairfax County how difficult it is to attract people to Fairfax, particularly if they're not going to, come in as middle managers making $150,000 a year or whatever, but just people doing, the basic day-to-day work, whether it's retail or whatever. They're having a horrible time getting them to come. And if they do come, they're living in overcrowded situations, and they're commuting long distances, which we don't want to see. And so you got all that going, and then just the issue of good housing development contributes to what we call placemaking, creating a place where the Economic Development Authority can go out across the country and market Fairfax County as a wonderful place to live. Attracts the workforce of the 21st century, and the employers follow them. The way it works these days, if you don't have an attractive community that brings the workforce and has an established workforce, then the employers are going to look elsewhere to set up their shops. So it all ties together, and it's working pretty well right now.
To tie in the conversation that we had earlier with Brooke Schipporeit of the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, she focused on the federal component. And we talked a little bit about how those federal policies trickle down to the local level. So you mentioned that in 2015 you had a huge part in developing the strategic plan, the long term and the short term. Can you talk about how maybe federal policies shaped the creation of the strategic plan?
Yeah. Well, I think 2015 was the economic development plan. 2018 was when we approved the first 25, phase one, and 2019, phase two. In that process, I would say just the federal government is a major player in affordable housing. We would be in a terrible place without them. In Fairfax County, they probably fund more than half of the affordable housing programs. But I think most of what they would do is vouchers, rental vouchers. They also provide us with funding, which is called community development block grants, which we are able to use for various reasons. But everything we did in terms of planning incorporates the fact, or reflects the fact that they are a partner and a financer. And without them, a lot of what we do couldn't happen.
Absolutely. So speaking of the county's approach to affordable housing, the Housing Committee posts the minutes or the discussion points from each monthly meeting. In February of 2023, there were a number of updates that the Housing Committee published. You all talked about the rental housing subsidies function or program within the county, rental assistance, affordable home ownership, affordable housing development and preservation. So essentially the county has like a multi-pronged approach to affordable housing. But one thing I'd like for you to focus on is the inclusionary zoning for fiscal year 2022. The previous programs that I mentioned, housing subsidies and rental assistance and affordable home ownership, perhaps most residents are familiar with that, but perhaps not so familiar with inclusionary zoning.
Okay, that inclusionary zoning is really an excellent tool that we have available to us. And I would say there's two parts to it that we use now, and there are other things we could do in the future. But first is we have an affordable dwelling unit program, which requires developers who, and this is a requirement, this is an ordinance, if they're going to develop more than 50 units of affordable or of market rate housing, their project's 50 units or more, they have to provide a percentage of those units as affordable. And if it's a for sale project, they can provide them as affordable for sale, which is, obviously great to enable people to buy into a nice development. And because the program applies to any development of that size, you're going to, and I'm going to qualify that in 1 second, you're going to get dispersion across the county. You're going to get affordable dwelling units wherever these properties are being built. Now, if it's a what we call an elevator building that has an elevator, they're not part of this program.
Gotcha. Okay. When we come back, we want to continue that point about inclusionary zoning. Please make sure you don't go anywhere as we continue our conversation with Supervisor John Foust of the Dranesville District, also the chair of the Housing Committee for Fairfax County. You do not want to go anywhere as we continue our conversation. We'll be right back.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things. 2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks. Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh, no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school. Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
And thank you so much for joining us on Inside Scoop as we continue our conversation with Supervisor John Foust of the Dranesville District, also the chair of the Housing Committee for the county. So when we left, Supervisor Foust, we were talking about, or you were telling us about the inclusionary zoning and why that's so important.
Yes, and I explained the affordable dwelling units. That's an ordinance, and it applies to 50 developments of 50 units or more, as long as they're not high-rise. High-rise, it doesn't apply. And so years ago, and that's because the cost is so much higher per unit. So years ago, the board and others negotiated with the development community and ultimately come up with a program. It's not an ordinance, but it is a program that almost everybody accepts as kind of what we're going to do. And basically it is a workforce, WDU, workforce dwelling unit program. And whereas affordable housing typically covers 60% or less of the area median income, the workforce development units are typically 60 was to 120. We've modified it to because we've modified it in negotiating with the development communities, 60 to 80% now. And basically what that says, in Tyson's, for example, a significant percentage, I think it's 12% now, of units that are constructed must be delivered as WDUs, workforce development. In other words, 12% of those units must be affordable to people earning between 60 and 80% of AMI. You can imagine they're pretty expensive units if they don't have that type of restraint on the pricing. So as a consequence, we're getting a lot of units. There are hundreds and hundreds in the pipeline that have been approved as part of the zoning that will be delivered, but there are many, many out there now already, and it's another piece of the another tool in the toolbox as to how we're going to deliver the housing that is affordable in Fairfax.
You used a key word. You said must, like a certain percentage must be workforce dwelling units. So are developers obligated?
No.
Or is it just a nice to have?
Well, I would say it's expected, but it's not an obligation. I mean, it's not legally a requirement. But I mean, this may sound a little I don't know, naive, perhaps, but in my experience, we get no pushback on it. You get a pushback to some extent when you're negotiating what the percentages should be, like we just modified the income levels and the percentages because the program was delivering too many units that were really available to people at market rates. We didn't need to limit the pricing. So yeah, I mean it was a very detailed and in-depth negotiation with the developers and the advocates and everybody else to come up with the numbers. What are the numbers in the program? Having done that, with those numbers, we don't and we can't require a developer to deliver those percentages at those income levels, but they do. I mean, the development community appreciates the opportunity to develop in Tysons and in areas where we've put in so much public infrastructure, and it works, and it's working well, and it's been working for a long time now.
Okay. A point that I brought up in the first segment is in Fairfax County, 1 in 17 residents is living at or below poverty. So with a policy or an expectation that a developer builds or makes available 10% of its total units, let's just say, for the sake of numbers, the total build will be 80, but please be nice and create 8 units that are affordable. Are we doing enough with 1 in 17 people in Fairfax County living at or below the poverty line? Yeah, well, if that was all we're doing, it would not be enough. But the realities, the project, what they say, the project has to pencil for the developers. So, would I like to see 50% of the units be affordable until we solve our affordability problem? Of course, but that's not realistic. So we try. That's the negotiation. Where is that sweet spot? Considering everything else that we ask for in terms of transportation, schools, and parks. So it's we'll never know if we got the absolute correct balance, but I think we're close. Yeah, I think it works. So you have that, and then we have all the other things that we're doing, in terms of delivering affordable housing. And I think I said, affordable in our minds is 60 and less. I think the 1 in 17, that's probably, in poverty, they're probably 30% or less. I mean, there's a large number of people in Fairfax County who live on less than 30% of the area median income. And our programs, that's the one place where we have to do better, as far as I'm concerned. And we know it, and it's universal. It's not just Fairfax County; it's everywhere. People earning that little income can only afford a very modest amount of rent, but the cost of delivering that house or unit is the same as, almost as much as people who are willing to pay market rate. So the differential between what they can pay and what the market rate is paying, or what it costs to deliver that, has to be made up. And that's where government comes in, that's where nonprofits come in, that's where creative financing and public-private partnerships and all kinds of things, trying to make up that difference so that we can deliver the houses or the units at affordable rates for people who are extremely low income. Absolutely. One thing that I really appreciate about the county is its data transparency. And so there is a Fairfax County Affordable Housing dashboard. It's got about 6 slides on there, but 2 that I want to speak to with our few minutes left. So there's one titled, Committed Affordable Rental Homes by District. And that means committed affordable homes, both privately and publicly owned, that have restrictions to keep rent affordable for a specific period of time. And the top 3 districts are Mason at 21%, which is around 3,200, Hunter Mill at 17%, and Lee at 15%, which is around 2,300. The lower 3 are Braddock at 6%, Dranesville at 5%, and Springfield at 2%, which means of the committed affordable rental homes, it's only about 296. What do you think, what speaks to that kind of disparity between the 21% at Mason at 3,200 and the 2% in Springfield? Yeah, a lot of it has to do with where multifamily housing is developed, and when these units are in the workforce development units are in multifamily. But the number 2, I think you said 286. 296 for Springfield, 296. Yeah.
You know, I would have to look behind that number because if that's not the total number of committed affordable housing units in Fairfax County, but it's not even close.
That's just for Springfield.
Right?
Right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
That's
having a heart attack. They took away our affordable housing. No, okay. So that's the main reason, I think, is the multifamily housing where it's being constructed, if it's committed. Now, the more interesting is the market rate affordable housing, and that's, you know, isolated in certain magisterial districts, and that's just, it's less expensive. It's older, typically, if it's market rate. But anyway, I'll let you ask me the question.
Sure. During our earlier conversation, as we were preparing for the show, one thing that I appreciated you mentioning was the importance of home ownership and the creation of generational wealth. So what programs can you just spotlight with our 2 minutes left that the county has available to do just that, to create generational wealth?
Yeah, there are some programs available for first-time home buyers in terms of down payments and just the initial costs. They're not as aggressive as I would like to see. You know, we have most people are becoming aware of how we got this situation and how certain groups of people, you know, have been left out of the opportunity to own homes.
Sure.
There's no doubt in my mind that there's you know, we've got to do more to close the wealth gap and to help everyone have the ability to own a home. It's, you know, there's a lot of people who no longer feel they want to own a home, but those who do should be able to, and we can do more. We set the staff loose on coming up with ideas to bring back to the board for us to pick and choose which ones we want to fund and help and make it better than it currently is.
Absolutely. Again, you've heard it here. If you want more information on the Housing Committee for Fairfax County, make sure you visit fairfaxcounty.gov for more information. Thank you so much for joining us. As you all know, my favorite part of tonight's show is always going to be the end, so we can get to know more about our guests. So I'm going to ask Supervisor Foust 3 questions. Supervisor Foust, name a world leader with whom you would like to have a 1-hour conversation.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter. Okay, and name an event in U.S. history you would like to go back to or be a part of.
The Johnstown flood. I'm from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I think you gave me the option to undo it, and I would undo it.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us for Inside Scoop. We'll see you next week.